What we're going to do now is we're working on the electronics part. This is just cheap speaker wire. Um, if you look, speaker wire comes usually with a one wire having a white stripe on it, the other side blank, or sometimes this is a ridged side. Doesn't really matter how you wire it. The way I was taught was the white stripe is the positive side. So these are the LEDs. And this is a little weird how I'm wiring this, just because how the layout is in the Scythe is a little weird. I'm playing with space. So I twisted the wires around here, and I slipped on a little piece of shrink tubing, of heat shrink tubing. You can buy a whole little pack of these. Every once in a while they'll go on sale at Harbor Freight or anywhere you can get them fairly cheap. I bought a pack of them. I think they were like $1 for a bunch of different sizes. What I ended up doing was I cut them two pieces, 1 inch in length. What I'm going to do is slide them over the wire. So the wires are exposed. Now this side, I have the other LED. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to twist these wires around this. Okay. Just go like this. You're not really doing this because it's going to help hold the wire. What it's going to do is it's going to give it more points of contact when we solder. Now there's a couple ways you can solder. You can use, actually, let me go get my soldering kit and I'll show you while I'm here. Okay, so there's a couple different ways you can do things. This is flux. This is what I use to, if I can open it, it's kind of slimy, I use this one I mainly use for my electronic stuff, but essentially flux is what you can do to solder pipes together. Plumbers call it sweating pipe. But this is basically, it's an acid. What it does is it cleans the metal. Metal likes to oxidize. It takes the oxygen out of the air and makes a little coat on it. That's what rust is iron oxide. So this cleans that junk off of the metal, leaving just the pure metal. This is what I use if I'm welding or soldering a little circuit board. But the main thing I use this for is soldering wires together. The reason why I use solder instead of connectors like this, they sell butt connectors and splice connectors and all these different ones. The problem is those can work loose. If you solder this, it basically turns this into one piece of metal. So these two LEDs and this thicker gauge wire are going to be basically attached together, unbreakable. And because I'm going to glue all of this inside that scythe, I'm never going to be able to get to this without basically destroying the blade part. So I don't want to do that. I don't ever want this to come apart. So I'm investing the time and energy into soldering this and putting the heat tubing over it, because I don't want this to short out. I don't want any problems in the future. So what we do is I've got my cheapy little soldering iron getting hot. You can touch this and see it just basically vaporize this. There's a thin coat of metal on the soldering iron tip. Some people call this tinning, because see how it's not melting very well on this side? But on this side where I use it, you can kind of tell, it has a buildup of solder on it. So that helps this melt faster. So what we're going to do is, you can't just melt this and then let it drip on here. because this hot stuff will not stick to metal. It'll just actually roll off. And I'll probably screw up since I haven't soldered in a while, and I'm sure you'll see some stuff pop up. Okay, what I do is I just, hold on, let me get that. In my wiring video, you can see how I wired these LED strips to regular just speaker wire. I drilled a little channel out of here, put this in here, hot glued it in. I will hot glue these in just a second. This is the blade that I showed you. I sanded, cut down. I glued this frosted piece to the back, and it just peeled right off, and it was starting to pull some of the flake from this oriented strand board up. And glue wouldn't stick to it. Hot glue wouldn't stick to it. I tried E6000. That didn't work. So I was scrambling because I didn't have time. I was running out of time. So, and I tried sanding this. It was a rough surface on the back. You might be able to tell from the video, I don't know. So what I ended up doing was I put liquid nails, construction adhesive, that yellow goop. Basically what I did was I put a little bit on there, smeared it with a popsicle stick, and put this on here. I'll show you when I put the other side, because now I know this works. I won't waste your time with all the other stuff that didn't. What I did do is I drilled small holes in here, and the liquid nails push through. So those act almost like rivets or screws to hold this on here. I pushed on this pretty hard. I don't want to break it, but it's not coming off. Another modification that I did, I went and bought, excuse my arm, some high temperature glue sticks instead of just the regular ones. This is a lot more rigid. I'm really impressed with this stuff. You can really torque on it and it doesn't break or pull off like the other stuff. So I'm quite happy with that. And while I'm at it, I'll show you. This is the head that the scythe goes on. I ended up putting the on-off switch so it'll be hidden behind the skull, up underneath the skull. In my video I showed you where I soldered these blade connectors onto the switch, and this is that high strength hot glue. So that is like this, and this is going to fit, oops, and it fits right up in there. So you really won't be able to see it too much. I'm going to paint it gray like the skull, but this is going to fit like that. So I'm quite happy with the way that looks. And it's got a couple points of contact that's up against the jawbone and the top of the skull, as well as being hot glued to the little bone piece here. So this should be rock solid. I've pushed on it fairly hard. I'm sure I could torque on it and it would break. I didn't want to do anything super indestructible with regards to this switch, because of anything that's going to break on this build, it's probably this switch. It's the only really moving part. So this I want to be able to take off if I can. If worse comes to worse, I'll be able to take 2 screws out here, 2 screws out here, pull the blade out, disconnect the wires to the blade, disconnect 3 screws to pull it from the skull, and then just either cut this glue off, hit it up with a hot glue gun, a little hot X-Acto knife, something like that to get this glue off of here, and just replace the switch. So it's not a complete disaster if this switch dies on me. I did test it before I put it on there. That's important because you don't want to go through all this work and the thing not work. So that's what we have so far.